Greetings and welcome to this edition of Faith to Live By. I'm Pam Christian, your host, where each week I seek to help us explore current events from a biblical and prophetic perspective. Today, I bring you part 2 of my interview with Jekielek, senior editor of the Epoch Times and host of the show American Thought Leaders, who will help us explore the Iran conflict and the China connection. Jan's career has spanned academia, international human rights work, and for the past 2 decades, media. I'll share the interview with you in just a bit. First, it's imperative I address the events in Iran as best I can, given the information war and the relentless deep state-owned media attacks against President Trump. Then you'll hear part 2 of the interview with Jekielek. Then, following the interview, I want to share some highly significant prophecies. Last week, I had to post my podcast before 8 o'clock p.m. on Tuesday the 7th, meaning it was before the deadline President Trump gave the Iranian leaders. As I think we all were, I was holding my breath and was pleased to learn Iran had agreed to a 2-week ceasefire and to hold negotiations for peace. However, as I said to Jan last week, I have never known Iran to be good for their word unless it's their mantra of wanting to annihilate Israel and the United States. That's the only thing I can believe from them. And honestly, I have every confidence that President Trump doesn't trust the leaders of Iran for their word either, and here's why. President Trump posted a statement about the ceasefire and the opening of the Strait of Hormuz for the purpose of amplifying Tehran's acceptance of the ceasefire terms, making Iran's own acceptance known to the world. Then, when they go back on their word, the whole world will know they have, which will give support to additional actions the United States takes. President Trump is not betting on the credibility of Iran's leadership. Rather, he's betting on the people of Iran. Susan Kokinda from Promethean Action explains, quote, "It's not about a country being crushed, but of the people choosing civilization," end quote. President Trump's plans have been laid out for everyone to see in the United States National Security Strategy. I recommend you read it, so I've got a link for you in the show notes. In short, President Trump's plans are on reestablishing the United States as a sovereign nation, which requires dismantling the spiderweb of nations that have been working to destroy America, the one nation that is standing in the way of their globalist agenda. This includes the British Empire and the nations supporting them, and China and its partnering nations and people. As God has prophetically revealed, there are many individuals in the United States government who have been working with China against the United States. More on this later. President Trump also seeks to expose corruption and give nations that are not supporting its people a chance to follow in the example of the United States in becoming independent, sovereign nations, which clearly dismantles the advances the globalists have made in nearly accomplishing their goals according to their published plans known as Agenda 2030. As you recall, they were on track and so close to accomplishing their goals through a variety of sinister means involving many people and countries by the year 2030. President Trump has already made significant inroads to their demise and strengthening the independence of the United States, beginning with Venezuela. The capture of Maduro was simply step 1 in President Trump's much bigger plan. It's essential we step back and take a bird's eye, rather an eagle eye view of all President Trump has done to understand his strategy and recognize the tremendous successes to know the truth. Another clue that we are grasping truth is to take note of who is unhappy and seeking to discredit President Trump. That's a sure sign the individuals, media, corporations, or governments are part of the deep state. And it's essential we know the history involved. Did you know the British Empire actually built Iran as a cockpit of war? Again, according to Susan Kokinda of Promethean Action, they created the Muslim Brotherhood, the mother of Islamic extremism, while also cultivating revisionist Zionism. And then they played Arab against Jew, Sunni against Shia, nation against nation. This is the standard play in the British Empire's book for creating and maintaining forever wars, end quote. This is how it happened. The British and American intelligence overthrew Mohammad Mossadegh in 1953. He was Iran's democratically elected prime minister from 1951 to 1953, who famously nationalized the British-controlled oil industry. Mossadegh was overthrown in a 1953 CIA M16-backed coup known as Operation Ajax because of rising tensions with the Shah and Western powers. The tensions were a result of Mossadegh wanting to use Iran's oil to develop the country. This was not something the British Empire wanted, and with the empire's partners embedded in the American CIA, they worked to stop it. By the 1970s, the Shah was working an aggressive program of industrialization and modernization. In response, the British Empire launched its oldest tool, religious extremism. The mullahs replaced the Shah, theocracy replaced development, and civilization reversed into Dark Age. Kokinda stated, quote, "Donald Trump looked at that 47-year-old trap and made a bet, not on Iran's regime, but on Iran's people. He gambled on civilization," end quote. And who is not happy with the strategy? Netanyahu, who warned Trump against the ceasefire before it happened. Lindsey Graham invoked the Libya model, which is not a model at all, but a warning to surrender your weapons or uranium and see what happens. Well, 8 years after Libya surrendered their weapons, a NATO-backed mob murdered Gaddafi, who was a Libyan military officer, revolutionary, politician, and political theorist who ruled Libya from 1969 until his overthrow in 2011. Kokinda explains, what the war party of the British imperialist ideology wants to offer Iran is the same as what was offered to Libya. Lindsey Graham posted, quote, "I prefer diplomacy if it leads to the right outcome regarding the Iranian terrorist regime. That's why a congressional review process like the one the Senate followed to test the Obama-Iranian deal is a sound way forward," end quote. It's revealing that Graham wants a congressional review process during a time of exceedingly delicate efforts for negotiations while the world is holding its breath regarding what will tactically happen next. The majority of Congress would like nothing less than to stop President Trump. And the deep state-controlled media is also bent on preventing President Trump any success because it means their demise. Did you see the lengthy article titled "How Trump Took the United States to War with Iran" from the New York Times? It's an exceptionally detailed article, available from an unknown source, fueling suspicion that someone from the White House leaked the story. The article is written to cause as much damage to President Trump as possible and to divide his MAGA base through their claims from an unrevealed source. You'll want to read the article for yourself, so find the link in the show notes. When I heard Benny Johnson's review of this New York Times article, I had a tough time arriving at the same conclusion he did, as many of his followers did. He voiced a firm opinion that Benjamin Netanyahu gave faulty information to President Trump with his warnings about the ceasefire. And on Sunday, April 12th, in response to the objections of his many followers, Benny posted another show doubling down on his position. Benny bolstered his position in part by citing the White House had not come against the article when they have a track record of destroying anything that is false, especially from the New York Times. Johnson also cited the statements of John Ratcliffe, who said the information from Netanyahu was farcical, and the words of Marco Rubio, who said it was, and I'll use the initials, BS. And more, he cited the words of Joint Chief of Staff General Dan Kane, who is quoted to have said, "Sir, this is, in my experience, standard operating procedure for the Israelis. They oversell, and their plans are not always well developed. They know they need us, and that's why they're hard selling," end quote. The line of thought is Israel wants to go to war with Iran, and they are misleading President Trump to make that happen. Benny expressed President Trump has been very open about his U.S. military objectives of killing the Ayatollah and seriously diminishing Iran's ability to make war. Both objectives are already accomplished. So the point is, with Iran's leadership and military capabilities greatly diminished, means Iran is incapable of making war. Israel should back off, but Netanyahu is not. Instead, he has made his desire to topple the entire Iranian regime, which President Trump has been openly against from the start. Additionally, even after agreement for a 2-week ceasefire was publicly revealed, Israel continued to be militarily engaged with Lebanon. There's been much made out of whether or not Lebanon was part of the territory for ceasefire. Perhaps Netanyahu's intended solution for peace is through military might. Regarding Lebanon, Benjamin Netanyahu has said he wants a real peace agreement that will last for generations, end quote. But it seems Netanyahu is pursuing a dual-track strategy toward Lebanon, combining intense military pressure against Hezbollah while at the same time demanding a diplomatic peace pact. He demands Hezbollah's disarmament and security framework as a condition for long-term peace while refusing to halt ongoing intense military strikes. Recall, Hezbollah is an Iran-backed Shiite militia that is currently involved in the war between the United States, Israel, and Iran. Prime Minister Netanyahu's strategy is vastly different from what President Trump's is. Donald Trump has made clear his strategy for peace is through strength and construction. However, he has been clear he would use military might whenever necessary. In my opinion, when it comes to Iran, specifically the IRGC, there is no language except military prowess they will accept. Their hundreds of years of hatred for Israel and the United States cannot be diplomatically controlled. And we must remember it is a spiritual matter involving the ancient spirit, Prince of Persia, which is assigned to Iran, disclosed in the Bible in the book of Daniel, chapter 10. Regardless of what mainstream media seeks to have us believe, according to Susan Kokenda, President Trump knows exactly what he's doing. President Trump is offering something different that he's bringing about not through NATO or the British European institutions that have managed the Middle East misery for a century. He is working through the countries that are part of his Board of Peace who are rising up to be part of the solution, something mainstream media does not report because it gives credit to President Trump. As you probably know, Pakistan mediated the ceasefire with the involvement of Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey, a collection of nations excluding Pakistan, believed to be represented in the War of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel 38 and 39, providing another spiritual reality that is interesting to say the least. Kokenda points out these same countries have been used by the British Empire by pitting them against one another, and they are now acting as partners for peace. And Trump's Board of Peace was built exactly for this purpose. Then Kokenda points out who is not at the negotiating table? The British. This reveals Trump's strategy is clearly about much more than just Iran. The deal to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, brokered by Pakistan, cuts the British architecture out of the solution entirely, Kokenda said. The empire that built this cockpit of war is not present as it, the British Empire, gets dismantled. That's what a civilizational gamble looks like when it starts to pay off. The golden age of the Middle East is not the Libya model, end quote. This is a lot bigger than just the Middle East. It's about bringing down the British Empire, and, as I'll reveal, it's also about China. President Trump is refusing to give the empire what it wants. The British Empire has always been about endless wars, yet so far President Trump has stopped 8 wars in his first year this term, and now is seeking to liberate countries from corrupt governments that are bringing harm to other world nations. Consider the success of taking down the drug cartel in Mexico and, of course, Venezuela. Based on prophecy, I believe we will see President Trump helping to liberate Cuba and Colombia, 2 other nations the Biden and his fake administration, under Obama's instructions, poured billions of taxpayer dollars into for the purpose of destroying the United States from within. President Trump is giving the people of Iran a choice. And at last year's Munich conference, and again recently at Budapest, Vice President Vance made the same offer to the Europeans. You can build and you can believe in a future. We know Vice President Vance traveled to Pakistan to continue talks for peace in Iran, only to return and report there is no deal because Iran insists on a nuclear program. Of the 15 original peace points President Trump published, the 2 most essential were for Iran not to have a nuclear capability and for the Strait of Hormuz to be opened, neither of which did Iran agree. For the entire world, the present-day choice is civilization or the Dark Age. Kokenda says Trump's gamble is paying off, but he and leaders seeking peace and freedom from the power and control of the British Empire need the support of the people of the world to help build the movement, maintain the gains made, and advance. Trump is betting on the people of Iran to want civilization enough to find the resources, leadership, and resolve needed to make that happen. In the meantime, he and those countries he is gaining support from are doing what they can to set the stage for Iran's citizens to succeed. And the China connection? It's deeper than I realized. In addition to Canada, China has used Iran as a proxy for the destruction of the United States. The globalists know China is not on board with their plans. China wants to be the superpower of the world. However, the globalists welcome the destruction of the United States. While President Trump positively acknowledged China's involvement through Pakistan in getting Iran to the negotiating table, he has also had to warn China against their intentions of sending weapons to Iran. April 7th, President Trump suggested Beijing used its influence as a top oil purchaser to bring Tehran to the negotiating table amid the ongoing U.S.-Iran war. The Chinese Foreign Ministry said on Wednesday that it welcomed the ceasefire, adding that China has made its own efforts toward realizing lasting peace in the Middle East. However, with Iran refusing to the two main points, no nuclear capabilities and opening up the Strait of Hormuz, China now seems to be trying to play both sides of the war. On April 12th, according to U.S. intelligence reports, we learned China is preparing to send air defense systems, specifically MANPADS, which are shoulder-fired missiles, to Iran. These shipments are reportedly intended to be routed through third countries to mask their origin, potentially undermining the fragile ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran. If China does that, China is going to have big problems, Trump told reporters on Saturday afternoon. The prospect of China directly transferring weapons to Iran during the ongoing regional conflict risks deepening the war and triggering a broader geopolitical consequence, particularly for the U.S. and China relations, already strained by trade disputes, military tensions, and the war in Iran. Why would China want to supply Iran with weapons? Because Iran is China's proxy that can be used against the United States. As you know, Iran has been trying to hold the world hostage by laying claim to control of the Strait of Hormuz, preventing oil tankers taking oil to other nations from passing through. However, I learned Iran did allow 5 to 7 ships to pass through because they were willing to pay $2 million each. What's of the greatest interest is that these ships were required to pay the toll in Chinese yuan. In response to Iran's attempt to control the Strait of Hormuz, President Trump said, effective immediately, the United States Navy will prevent ships from passing through the Strait of Hormuz, accusing Iran of extorting them. Then, another development to deal with is Saudi Arabia. On April 12th, Saudi Arabia announced that the East-West pipeline, or Petroline, has been fully repaired and restored to its maximum capacity of approximately 7 million barrels per day. My first reaction was relief, thinking this curtails any power plays by China. But then I learned of the relationship China has with Saudi Arabia. While China and Saudi Arabia are not formal military allies, they have developed a robust, comprehensive strategy partnership. Their relationship is deeply economic, focusing on energy trade of over $100 billion and technology. China and Saudi Arabia have strengthened defense ties, including arms deals, while Saudi Arabia maintains its primary security partnership with the United States. This creates another serious twist to world events, which will be further explored with the prophecies I'll be sharing later. On Monday, April 13th, President Trump followed through with his announcement to blockade all Iranian ports in the Strait of Hormuz, and this is proving to be a brilliant maneuver. As of Tuesday, April 14th, we've learned how the strategy is greatly crippling Iran, who typically makes $1 billion a day from the sale of Iranian oil. President Trump has invited those who would buy oil from Iran to purchase their oil from the United States instead. China purchases 50% of their oil from Iran for a subsidy. For China to then purchase oil from the United States, even at a reduced price of below $100 a barrel, the purchase price also being subject to tariffs, makes the comparative purchase quite costly. So, with a single maneuver, President Trump is seriously crippling both Iran and China. And Iran has already asked for negotiations to resume, which are scheduled for Thursday, April 16th. And because 20% of the world's oil is purchased through the Strait of Hormuz, President Trump is in effect remaking global economy in real time. This is American dominance in action. There are so many nuances and backgrounds to all of this, but I think I've covered the most important today. Now, let me bring on Jekielek to help us further consider China and motivations of the CCP. Jan is senior editor of the Epoch Times, a documentary film producer, and best-selling author, very well versed about the entire China connection. Let me ask you another question, which I know involves conjecture, but President Trump has delayed his trip to meet with the president in China to May 14 and 15. Are you inclined to think that perhaps that's because he wants to make sure the Iran situation is wrapped up?
I think there's probably multiple reasons, but I think that's definitely part of it because with the Iran war over, he's coming in with a lot more leverage.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the only way, and the president, I think, understands this very clearly. People debate this and they say, well, I think he knows that COVID probably cost him the election in 2020. And where that came from, or at least, certainly, people kind of debate this. One thing you can't debate is that China weaponized the virus once it was out in a whole variety of ways, including using the World Health Organization as a tool to lie to the world and create, a much bigger problem than necessarily that would have happened. That there was this crazy report that this kind of group that went to China to sort of assess the reality on the ground there from the WHO wrote with a kind of a glowing support for the Chinese narrative, and it was just total utter falsehood in an extreme way. And arguably that report was one of the single most damaging things that caused the world. It's unclear whether the world would have locked down even if it wasn't for that report, right? And it was just a piece of essentially CCP propaganda, like what a captured agency looks like.
Mm-hmm.
that just didn't have any semblance of independent inquiry.
Well, let me ask you the next question on my mind then. When President Trump does visit with Xi Jinping, what should we be looking out for? What should we be hoping for?
I think the president has been building his arsenal of leverage to deal with communist China, because again, that's the only language they really understand. It's and of course they have some leverage as well. So I think what the president's trying to do is to place us in as good a position as possible to
Mm-hmm.
basically have that negotiation. I mean, we could go into the details of some of the things that are on, like, kind of on the table, but ultimately, right, the Chinese Communist Party has been abusing the global trade system in an extreme way for decades,
Right.
with our bizarre compliance, essentially. And the president is looking to break that. And has, in a way, right? They're in a very difficult situation because they're one of the major prongs of their economy that was left, which was real estate, is basically collapsed, and they're essentially an export economy. So the tariff tool, which again, we have to kind of figure that out on our end with the Supreme Court, deciding against the particular legal authorities that the president was using to exact the tariffs. But I think there's other ways to do it. That is an incredibly both powerful and important piece of leverage, because it's sort of forcing the CCP to play more fair, if you will, right, and not abuse this system. But the effect is that they like, because they have to sell even at fire sale prices.
Mm-hmm.
That whole economy is really run through that sale of selling anything, right, at whatever price, because otherwise so I don't know if I'm answering your question directly, but I think this is a big piece. They're looking to get relief on these tariffs, and the president is looking to make sure that we have all the core things that they have assumed control over supply chains of, that we have enough to work with until we can develop our own, right? So it's kind of, it's like a chess, it's a chess game of sorts.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, we're definitely in a time of transition. And apparently so is China, because I was researching and I learned that early this year, 2026, there's a lot of reports about increasing unrest in China. A lot of it has to do with economic grievances, local government debt, apparently asset seizures, and a lot of military purge. And there's apparently protests by the Chinese people against the Communist Party. How is all this going to play into the meeting that President Trump has planned in May?
So the unwritten contract that as far back as Deng Xiaoping, that was kind of signed with the Chinese people, is we're going to agree to despotic rule by the Communist Party in exchange for the ability to become prosperous or more prosperous. And that kind of worked for a while. Remember, the Communist Party basically drove people into such a depth of despair that there was rampant cannibalism, right? There's another one of these horrible pieces of propaganda that everyone keeps repeating, like as if it's obviously true. There's, of course, there's a kernel of truth to it, is that China lifted millions out of poverty, right? You keep hearing this, and it's like the kernel of truth is that it happened, but the part that you don't say, which is really important, is that it also drove them into this utter hell, economic hell of literal cannibalism across the country, because they created a famine that was, entirely man-made, entirely made by really bad communist totalitarian policy. So people are like so grateful. It's like having Stockholm syndrome, right? I'm just so grateful that I can actually make some money, because before I don't I can't even think about what we had to do to survive, right? And so this has been the contract basically. And also the party keeps reminding people by creating black classes, of a variety of sorts. Landowners, very early on when they wanted to seize the land, they're people that you're allowed to, treat as subhuman, for whether you call them dangerous or just worse than you, or there's all sorts of propaganda that goes into it. But this has been just something they've done over a very long period of time. And so my point is that most of the population is aware of this black class creation, and they don't want to become part of that black class. So you kind of mind your own business. Most people, you keep your nose low, you don't get in the crosshairs of the party. But now, because their economy is grinding to a halt, because it's a parasitic, we could talk about this for a whole episode, but it's a parasitic economy. It doesn't stand on its own two legs. It requires essentially a lot of foreign capital, and a lot of it, well, some willing transfers of technology and so forth. So part of it is stolen, part of it is willing. They've just kind of built themselves into this global economic system in a way that allows them to kind of survive and not exactly thrive, but in some ways thrive. Like, you know, to give you another example, right? A lot of people don't know this, but the per capita GDP of Taiwan is 3 times that of China.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, exactly. Because we all have heard how great China has been, right? And it's, of course, Taiwan's way smaller, right? But in terms of like per person success, it's 3 times, right?
Wow.
So, and you just never know that, because again, they're very good at their information warfare,
Mm.
so to speak. So they're in a situation right now where they're going to be facing increased protests. The protests, by the way, have been happening for a very long time. But when the economy is failing, which it is, that increases. And ultimately, because they're not delivering the one thing they promised, which is allowing people to have, either, despite totalitarian rule, a modicum of prosperity. And they're not. That's being taken away as we speak. I'm not even talking about the 40% of China that never had it, that's always been way below the poverty line.
It's hard to imagine. It's really hard living here in the affluent United States. The kinds of things that the people in China have had to suffer. I mean, the forced famine alone. driving them, as you said, to cannibalism. And now, and this is what you focus on in your book, is forced organ harvesting. Can you help my audience understand the realities of this horrific system?
So you hear about organ trafficking, black market organ trafficking rings. The typical urban myth thing is, someone wakes up on ice with a cut in their side, they're missing a kidney. Okay, that actually does happen, that sort of thing. There is black market organ trafficking in different parts of the world, and it's horrible. What's happening in China is a whole different level, a whole different thing. It's a large scale industrial operation. And you have to have a state actor like the Communist Party to accomplish it. Okay. And because you have to have one, we talked about their ability to project propaganda, right? So, I mean, the biggest target of that propaganda is not foreign adversaries, it's their own people. Okay. And this ability to create the black classes I mentioned, right? There's always one or a few groups that are marked, tagged as these sort of people you never want to be, right? Because they're the people, they wanted to seize land, they targeted the landowners, and they made them through mass propaganda seem dangerous, subhuman, activating this kind of quirk in our psychology, human psychology, which allows us to just sort of not be as concerned about them as we should. As normal human beings, we don't like to do horrible things to other people, whether it's just take their stuff wantonly and harm them in the process or even kill them. That's hard, right? But the moment you start believing someone's dangerous or some kind of, weird other group that should be held in contempt or lesser than you, all of this type of stuff is used basically to kind of demonize and dehumanize these different groups of people. And you need this to get this killed to order, which is the name of my book, Enterprise. You need that part, this ability to dehumanize a whole group of people. And the other part is you have to have the ability to incarcerate a huge group of people. And I'll explain why. So, in an ethical transplantation system, say in the US, when it's done right, I need a new heart. Okay. How do I get that heart? Well, someone has to basically have a car accident or a motorcycle accident, most typically. And then our bodies reject things that are foreign to our bodies. So, including foreign organs. So, we try to approximate that by matching an organ by getting similar blood type, similar tissue type, similar size is important too. And to match all of that, so catastrophic accident plus all these variables matching you is rare. And you have to wait, months or years to get that new heart. Okay. But it happens and many people survive, but a lot of people die too and waiting for that heart. So in China, there was actually a whistleblower. Okay. The whistleblower wasn't in China, he was actually in Israel. He was an Israeli transplant surgeon named Yaakov Levy, professor of transplant surgery at Tel Aviv University. And he had a patient who told him, who had a really terrible heart condition, told him, look, I'm tired of waiting. I'm going to get it done in China in 2 weeks. Okay. And so how is that? So massive red flags here, right? Number one, this is 2005, 2006. This is happening. Number one, we scheduled when that heart transplant is going to happen. So that means that you somehow know when that catastrophic accident is going to happen. It means you're making it happen. It means you're killing a person. Okay. That's one. And number two, well, this 2 week time, how do you get the perfect, this right organ in 2 weeks? Well, so this is how they did it. In the 1990s, in China, there was a very, very popular spiritual discipline called Falun Gong that grew very quickly. It's very unusual in terms of, say, an organization that we'd be familiar with. It doesn't have like a roster. You don't actually join anything. There's teachings, truthfulness, compassion, forbearance. If you're living these teachings, there's lots of them, but there's no like hierarchy in it. There's no worship in it. And it's just incredibly self-directed, very grassroots, very bottom up. Okay. And it grew this way during the 90s to 70 to 100 million people by government estimate.
Wow.
Okay. And that's bigger than the Communist Party. Communist Party at the time was like 60 million official. And So the dictator at the time decided to crush it, to eradicate these people, to use his language. Now, just to be clear, that didn't mean kill everybody, okay? It meant put them into this re-education transformation system that every Black class kind of gets put into, struggle system, right? Where either you renounce, you admit that your wrongs, that the regime just decides one day this is what's right and this is what's wrong. You have to confess to the evil of your ways, and if you do, we might let you go. But if you don't, then you're a problem because we've spoken, and this is how it's going to be, right? And this is what's right. The sky used to be blue, now it's green, and you have to agree. Okay. So, but the Falun Gong were very resilient to this brainwashing, to this transformation process. So they started incarcerating maybe 1 million, maybe 2 million. It was a huge number of people, to the point where the Special Rapporteur on Torture in the UN estimated that half of all the people in China's massive incarceration system were Falun Gong practitioners. Okay, and that was 2005. That estimate came through. And this is what created the circumstances for kill to order, because you have this large dehumanized population that's in the system. And then some very evil person thinks to themselves, hey, wait a second, I have a directive here to eradicate Falun Gong. I'm also supposed to grow my transplant industry. So what did they do? They started blood typing, tissue typing, and organ scanning the people in this incarceration system ahead of time. They created a database, okay? And now let's say someone is coming and got the 100 grand or 200 grand that it requires to buy a heart in this as a transplant tourist. The moment that person pays the money, the so-called donor, who's actually a prisoner of conscience that's incarcerated, is already pre-matched because their vitals are in the database, and then that person can literally be just shipped and killed to order. And that's the reason my book is called Kill to Order.
Oh my God.
This is a whole different level we're talking about, and the scale of it is 60 to 90,000 transplants a year by our best estimate. So this is not a small operation. This is a very large operation, and it's been going for decades.
Jan, how did this industry, I guess I should call it, how did it emerge, and how is it related to CCP's secret 981 project that I understand is intended to extend the lives of the elite party leaders? I'll stop here for today and bring you Jan's answers with next week's podcast. Jan shared a lot about China that I deeply wish was not true. However, God has been exceedingly gracious in informing and assuring his people through prophecy. Jan said President Trump is seeking to build his arsenal in terms of world relations to deal with the Chinese Communist Party. We need to be praying for him to clearly discern the voice of the Holy Spirit, to be able to follow God's leading, certainly not just for the United States, but for the entire world. Regarding prophecies concerning China, I searched the posts through Julie Green from October 10th through April 9th, and I learned God referenced the word China 85 times in that period. It seems China has been plotting for a very long time to bring about the destruction of the United States. The China connection is vast, having strategic relations with Iran, Canada, Ukraine, Cuba, Colombia, and Venezuela. Alliances also include Obama, the Bidens, and a very high number of people in the United States Congress. Specifically, God said, quote, "The Senate is a joke to this nation. The majority are working with China against you, along with the intelligence community who tells them what to fight for and what to fight against." End quote. Also, through Julie Green, God revealed Obama was instrumental in funding much to defeat the United States through China, the Middle East, and Europe, including the formation of ISIS. God further revealed, and I loosely quote, "The truth on 9/11 will be revealed. The Bush family secrets will be exposed regarding why they wanted that war to break out and how they benefited. Their ties to the oil industry and Saudi Arabia, and deals made and contracts signed when both Bush Sr. and Jr. were in office will also be made known." End quote. And Faith Basco of Canada shared an article inspired by God from May 2025 regarding Iran. Here are some excerpts. Satan's plan is to use Iran as the nuclear option as his final solution, believing this will accomplish the final annihilation of Israel and the Jewish people. Understanding of the rising threat of Iran and this nation's place in ancient spiritual conflict centered on Israel is crucial. We live in a season of rapidly unfolding global events where the lines between politics, prophecy, and spiritual warfare have become blurred. We are at a critical juncture in history unfolding before our eyes. Something deeper than mere politics is unfolding on the world stage. What we are witnessing in the world is not random chaos, but an acceleration towards Satan's final strategy, the nuclear option. Faith's post is lengthy with excellent historical explanations you'll want to read for yourself, so I provided a link in the show notes. The last paragraph of the prophecy states, Satan's final strategy, the nuclear option, hangs heavy in the spirit, but God's promises remain unshaken. Israel will not be destroyed, the church will not be silenced, and Jesus will return to reign. Now is the time for ancient prophecies to be fulfilled. End quote. And at this point, it's very important I share with you prophecy and encouragement spoken through Donna Rigney Sagan. While in Israel during February-March of 2026, she became aware of God's desire to set his throne in Iran, suggesting a spiritual transformation amidst regional turmoil. I'll add, we've already received reports that Christianity is the fastest growing religion in Iran, albeit underground. Donna said, quote, God is moving to rescue the people of Iran with lightning speed, aiming to bring them into his kingdom during a time of intense conflict. And when on Elijah Streams, April 7th, Donna shared, God specifically said, quote, there will be a peace treaty and it will be followed to the letter. End quote. Dr. Patricia Green, Robin D. Bullock, Amanda Grace, Barry Wunsch, and so many other proven modern-day prophets have also had encouraging words about the outcome of all the events surrounding Iran. Remember, while modern-day Iran is situated where ancient Persia was, modern-day Iraq is believed to be where the Garden of Eden was located. The Middle East, as revealed in the Bible, is where the battle between Gog and Magog will take place, Ezekiel 38 and 39, and is the location where the last battle, the Battle of Armageddon, will take place in the Jezreel Valley or the Valley of Jehoshaphat in northern Israel, Revelation 16:16. We know what is actually occurring is the spiritual battle between good and evil occurring in the heavenlies and manifesting in our natural world. We must stand firm in faith, put on the full armor of God, and rely on God's strength rather than our own, all while resisting the devil, submitting to God, and praying constantly in the Spirit, using scriptures as a weapon of warfare. Pray and believe according to what God says, with faith, and not with fear according to how things appear. Next week, you'll hear part 3 of my interview with Jekielek, helping us gain more truthful understanding about the war in Iran and the China connection. Now I ask you to please listen to my closing announcements and for you to take advantage of the many goods and services I bring you in an effort to at least cover the costs of this podcast. If you like what you hear from me with this podcast, I highly recommend my book series, my award-winning blog, and consider signing up for my certificate course in apologetics. My aim with that course is to help people learn how not only to use apologetics to share truth with others, but to help Christian leaders incorporate apologetics into their respective ministries so more Christians are learning how to share their faith. You can learn more by using the link in the show notes. For now, I offer my weekly podcasts, my blog, and bi-monthly e-newsletter at no cost. And certainly I have hard costs associated with doing all I do. If you've been blessed by my work and would like to help my work reach others, why not consider partnering with me? For as little as $10 a month, you can become a partner. Then together we can reach even more people for Jesus. Simply visit my Pamela Christian Ministries homepage and then click on the Give button at the top menu bar. Or if you prefer, you can go directly to the Give page using the link in the show notes. To become a partner, you can use my PayPal or Venmo account, but you will also see other ways you can support my work on that page. Whether you choose to become a monthly partner, give a one-time donation, purchase my books and products from my web store, or support my affiliate sponsors, anything you can do to help me continue this work would be greatly appreciated. And as always, your prayers and telling others about me and my ministry work is much needed. When it comes to my selection of affiliate sponsors, I first look for Christian-owned and operated businesses, and I make a point of personally using the products or services so I can fully endorse them. I seek sponsors that offer products or services you can get via the internet worldwide, and I specifically consider what is common to most people universally. So you'll find health, beauty, and wellness products through Dr. Zelenko's Z-Stack supplements and from QE Strong. Dr. Zelenko's Z-Stack supplements are truly amazing and are available to my listeners for a 5% discount per purchase or a 10% discount for a monthly subscription using the promo code FTLB. You may have heard my interview with Rob Renee about QE Strong. Discover the benefits of quantum energy to overcome all sorts of ailments. Visit QEstrong.com and use the promo code FTLB at checkout to receive your discount. Then, my newest affiliate I'm really excited to bring you is Q Streaming. That's CUE Streaming Television. People with United States addresses can get over 3,000 channels, including live TV with streaming television without a contract. Get all of your local networks and favorite movie and sports and pay-per-view channels for about half of what cable costs. See the video promo link in the show notes to learn more. Affiliate sponsors only provide financial support to me when you purchase what they offer. So before you support Amazon or any other retailer, if I offer what you're looking for, please purchase through me. When it comes to special occasions, birthdays, or Christmas gifts, consider my books, jewelry, CDs, and more from my web store or any of the affiliate goods and services I offer. When you purchase from my web store, be sure to use the promo code TRUTH, TRUTH, to receive a 20% discount. Again, you'll find all the links in the show notes. If you like the content and resource material I bring you with this podcast, you'll find much more by connecting with me through my blog. In fact, my blog has been awarded 2 unsolicited awards for Christian content. And I'm also very active on social media. I can cover much more on social media than I can with this weekly podcast. And if you're not already subscribed, please subscribe to my complimentary bi-monthly e-newsletter. I offer encouragement, special offers, and one of my signature recipes with each and every edition. Yep, I'm a foodie and I love to entertain, which is why Faith, Family, Friends, and Food is a bonus segment of my bi-monthly e-newsletter. To receive even more, please be sure to check out my dedicated podcast listeners page, Beyond the Podcast. Here's where we can connect exclusively and you can download complimentary devotionals, resources, and more. On that page, I also ask you to help me learn more about you and what you want by completing the form visible once you scroll down that page. And something that is very easy for you to do and would mean a lot to me is for you to rate, subscribe, or comment on this podcast according to what your preferred listening platform allows. You know how it works. The more likes and subscriptions to this podcast, the more opportunity we have to expand the listening audience. And that means we can reach more people with the gospel message of Jesus while helping people learn how to better apply their Christian faith. I hope you'll join me next week and tell your friends and family to listen right here on Faith to Live By, where we learn how to gain spiritual victory over life's issues. Until next week, I'm Pam Christian, asking you to remember Christ died for us. The least we can do is live for Him.